Loud. Recording in progress. Good morning, everybody. Boker
Good
tov.
morning.
So we are continuing in our limud of Masechet Makkot, coming near to the nearly at the end of the Masechet. So B'ezrat Hashem soon we'll be able to have a siyum, which is very exciting. We are on currently Daf Kaf Aleph, Amud Aleph. That's where we are. We got up to the next Mishnah. So we're going to begin today from the Mishnah. Right, the Mishnah, you'll remember, just I'll remind you briefly, we've had this Perek is called Elohein Elokin. We've been going through a number of different lavim, number of different isurei lav, for which one would get Makkot, right, as the name of the Masechet suggests. And Rashi already told us at the beginning of the Perek that these are the Makkot, these are the lavim which are listed because they have some sort of a chidush in terms of the way they're derived, in terms of the halachot. The Gemara clearly does not go through and list every single isur lav which you get malkot, because there are very, very, very many of them. But the last one that we were discussing was our previous Mishnah listed 4 isurim, right? There was the peot harosh and peot hazakan, as well as lo yikrechu karcha v'lo yisratu saretet. In other words, the isur, the prohibition of tearing out one's hair or of inflicting a wound in one's body as a sign of excessive mourning, of excessive grief. It's interesting, the Rambam lists all these, not just the Rambam, but the Rambam lists all these different Isurim together in Hilchot Avodah Zarah. Those who might be learning Rambam Yomi, I know many learn Daf Yomi. There's also a Rambam Yomi cycle, which we restarted recently. If you do 1 Perek a day of the Rambam, you finish the entire Mishnah Torah in 3 years. Highly recommend it. Doesn't take too long. But the cycle yesterday Rambam Yomi began Hilchot Avodah Zarah. So in Hilchot Avodah Zarah, the Rambam lists, I think it's 51 different mitzvot, 51 mitzvot that are connected to Avodah Zarah. Not all of them are obvious, you wouldn't realize, but all the ones we've spoken about in our previous Mishnah are listed there in terms of shaving the corners of one's hair and destroying the corners of one's beard. Says the Rambam, this was the way of the idolatrous priests. This is the haircut that they would keep, and therefore the Torah said not to go in their ways. I think we discussed previously a little bit of a controversy that was caused by the Rambam writing that. Right? Do we still keep the mitzvot? There were those who understood that the Rambam was just giving a reason and were very upset because I think the Torah went in this direction that if the Rambam is given a reason for the mitzvah, well, what if that mitzvah reason no longer applies? What if we don't have this problem of distancing from Avodah Zarah in this way because the idolatrous priests are not commonplace among us, so they don't have this haircut anymore? And we saw the Rama, who comes out to defend the Torah and says, no, that's not what the Torah meant. That's not what the Rambam meant. In any event, so also these mitzvot of bodily harm, right, of self-harm, of destroying one's hair or creating wounds in one's flesh, that was done as a form of idolatry as well. That was done as a form of idol worship. We saw yesterday, the Gemara discussed the top of the Amud on Kaf Aleph Amud Aleph. Won't read it inside again now, but the Gemara made a distinction between if one wounds oneself as a sign of mourning versus if one wounds oneself as a part of worshipping Avodah Zarah. So this was part of the worship they would have. We now get on to another prohibition, which is also connected to Avodah Zarah. Seems to be, and that is the one of the prohibition of making a tattoo. The Mishnah says, we're now on, there are actually 2 Mishnayot on the Amud. So the first Mishnah on the Amud says, HaKotev Tovet Ka'aka, right? So one who makes a tattoo on one skin. Now, Katav Velo Kikakea, Kikea Velo Katav, Eino Chayav Ad Shichtov Via Ka'akea. So there are 2 elements to this. I'm not an expert in tattoos, but apparently the way that it's done is 2 parts. That there is a sort of an incision that is made, a tiny cut or hole, whatever it is made in one's skin, and then that is then filled up with the ink. So there's 2 parts. That's what the Mishnah calls the kirkea and katav. Kirkea is to make that incision, and then you fill it up with the ink. You fill it up with the writing. So it says that one would be chayav malkot only for doing both. If you did one without the other, that is not going to be, there's not going to be chayav. Would it still be a prohibition? Would it still be a Torah prohibition or a rabbinic prohibition? That's something which the poskim discuss. something which comes up in the Rishonim, where might this be a question? If somebody was to write on themselves, somebody was to take a pen and to write on their skin, right? So again, the Mishnah here is talking about something which is permanent. We'll see maybe what some of the poskim have to say here, but I think it's the Minchas Chinuch who writes that it would still be an Isur. I think he says would still be an Isur d'oraita if you just did the writing without the incision, but that's in a case where it is a permanent writing, which is not so common. He says he comes to the conclusion that is going to be still an Isur d'Rabbanan. We'll see a very interesting Tosfot that talks about this in a moment. It's not Tosfot over here. As you can see, there's not very much Tosfot on the page. It's Tosfot in Masechet Gittin, which is coming up in Daf Yomi. They might be there already. I'm not sure. So in any case, says the Mishnah, right? So Hakotev Ketovet Ka'aka Katav v'lo ki ka'akeh k'ka'akeh v'lo katav eino chayav ad shechtov ka'akeh. So the Chiyuv Makkot would only be upon performing both. Okay, says the Rivan over here at the bottom. You see in the white lines. He says Ketovet Ka'aka Kotef Tchila al B'saro. So it could be a person wrote first on their flesh, B'sam or B'sikra, with a certain type of ink. V'achar kach Maka'akeh habasar B'machat or B'sakin v'chnas hatzeva bein ha'or labasar. V'nireh bo kol hayamim. Right, so the case would be that where a person wrote first, and then they could make that incision sort of with a needle, with a knife, sort of cut the skin, and then the ink is going to sink in and is going to be etched in there permanently. Remember, that's whatever it's called in La'az. V'asur lichtov shum k'tiva ba'olam al b'saro b'nyan zeh. You would never be allowed to write on one's skin in such a way. That is says the Rivan over here, this is the Gzerat HaKatuv. Okay, we'll see that there might be what he's coming to say, Gzerat HaKatuv. It might be that he's coming to emphasize the fact here that there is no reason for it. We don't know the reason. We'll see again in a moment what the Rambam says. But so the Mishnah continues. Now we have different girsaot over here. In our girsa it says biyado, but it could be that it's meant to be bidio. Now the Masarat Hashas changes there. The Yud and the Dalet got switched around. But previously we spoke about whether you do this with a hand or with a kli, so that's why maybe it got confused. But bidio meaning with ink, kind of any ink used, or bichol is like a blue sort of ink that they would use. Ubachol davar shiroshem, with anything out which you write with. Okay, so that is the opinion of Tanakama, that one would be chayav for Tav and Ka'aka. Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda, Mishum Rabbi Shimon Omer. Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda says in the name of Rabbi Shimon, Eino chayav ad shechtov sham et Hashem. You are not chayav Makkot, says Rabbi Shimon, until you write Hashem, so you write the name. Which name? We're going to see. At this point, it sounds like it might be until you write Shem Hashem. But we will see, the Gemara will say that's not actually the case. Quotes from the Pasuk that it says, Ani Hashem. Okay, so just before we go now into the Gemara, let's look at the Rambam for a moment. We'll put it up on your screen. Excuse me. Okay. Share screen. Here we go. So this is, as I mentioned, the Rambam in Hilchot Avodat Kochavim, in the 12th Perek, so towards the end, and he says in Halacha Yud Aleph, Tovet Ka'aka Amoa B'Torah, Hu Shesaret Al B'Saro V'Yimaleh Makom HaSrita K'chol Odio O Shal Tzivonim Ma'or Shmi. So what is this Tovet Ka'aka which the Torah tells us about? He says if you would scratch your skin and then you would fill it up with ink or whatever other color. Okay, so interesting. The Rivan is maybe this is machloktim metziot, or this is different ways of performing it. The Rivan actually writes where you write first and then you make the cut, and somehow the ink is absorbed in. It would seem to me this is probably the more common way of doing it. As I said, I'm not an expert in tattoos, but this is how the Rambam says that you would make the incision first in the skin and then fill it with ink. Okay, And he says, as we mentioned, Ze haya minhag ha'akum sheroshmin la'atzman le'avodat kochavim. Right, this is where it comes from, says the Rambam. This was the idolatrous practice that they would make these tattoos on their skin. Klomar, shu eved machula umusham la'avodata. Very interesting. He says, why did they have a practice of making a tattoo? That it was a way of saying, right, they are an eved, as if they're a slave that has been sold to their gods, and they are sort of signed up and registered for its service. And the way they would do that is by doing the tattoo. So therefore, we are, says the Rambam, we are not allowed to do the same thing, right? And even if you write a tattoo with Shem Hashem, that you should also not very much not do. So whether it's a man or a woman, any place on your body, once you do this, you would get Makkot. Now, continues Rambam, Katav velo rasham b'tzeva, o sharasham b'tzeva velo katav b'srita, patur. If you, if you wrote, but you didn't fill it in with the color, or you put it with the color, but you didn't, in other words, you did one without the other, either the writing, but not the srita, that would be exempt. Ad sheichtov v'yikaka, as our Mishnah says, shneimar k'tovet kaka. Okay, so now he says the following. He says, Bakotev. What is this talking about? This is the one who did it themselves, meaning this is the one who made the tattoo. But somebody else did it on one skin, and made the tattoo on him. Again, you still can't do it, but you would not be chayav malkot unless he performed some sort of shiur, some sort of assistance to the action. But if he did nothing, he does not get Malkot. So this is similar to the previous discussion we had in the Gemara regarding the Mekif and the Nikaf, right? Remember, somebody who cuts off one's payers, right? So the Gemara said that they had a discussion that both the one who does it and the one who is done too, meaning the kata and the kati, right, would be, or the shaver and the shavi would both get Malkut. We saw three different terutzim in the Gemara as to why that is. One of them centered around the idea that it's the person who is having it being done to them is Messiah, is assisting. And we saw the Taz who said, and some of the other Achronim who said not every case of Messiah is Shaveh. But over here, so the Gemara does not discuss, but very interesting, the Rambam says the one who is making the tattoo is going to be chayav, but the one who is being tattooed, right, the tattooee, I guess, the tati, I don't know, whatever the word is, would not be chayav malkot unless they had brought some assistance. Obviously, the person decides, they walk into a tattoo parlor and they say, "Please, will you do this for me?" So that is going to be some sort of form of siyur. Okay. Just before we move on, share with you some chashukei chemed, right? Rav Zilberstein in the chashukei chemed has a number of interesting questions that come up here regarding tattoos. So he says, first question he writes about question was asked as follows. It says, okay, sometimes you have a soldier who is injured in war, in terrorist activity, and needs a blood transfusion. They may not be conscious, or you may not be able to get the information what type of blood they need. And he says, so they found a solution whereby they put a tattoo, form of tattoo, in one of the teeth, which has the type of blood that the soldier has. So the question is asked, would that be a prohibition of ktovet kaka, doing it on one's teeth? So he says, right, that's the same pasuk where we learn it from, and this is maybe why the Mishnah groups them together. The same pasuk talks about seret lanefesh, which we spoke about previously, and now about ktovet kaka. Says Rav Zilberstein, maybe the prohibition includes teeth as well. He says, nonetheless, same as Svarad, that ktovet kaka is probably in the skin, which is soft, and not in the teeth, which is hard. He quotes from Rav Chaim Kenievsky, who is all safer about this. Mishum she'ein ze nechshav lachakika. This is not considered sort of engraving. He says maybe even in Rabbanan there would be no isur. If you look in the Rambam, which we just saw, he says the language is that it's a ketovet kaka on one's skin, and that was the minhag of the right, quotes the Rambam. So therefore, he says that would be permitted in terms of the teeth. Seemingly would be permitted, or at least the tzarchiyim. The next question, which is quite a painful question, in fact, which Rav Zilberstein discusses. So the question comes up in terms of if one had a tattoo, would one be required to remove it? Again, I don't know exactly how this is done and how painful this would be, but he quotes, first of all, there's a Minchas Chinuch who says the following, Minchas Chinuch regarding Shabbat. We've spoken previously how all the different halachot of the Torah are all connected, right? We're going from Avodah Zarah and tattoos. Who would have thought we'd come to Hilchot Shabbat? But nonetheless, he says, he says the Minchas Chinuch, he says the Minchas Chinuch that if one was to remove a tattoo on Shabbat, right, so you were essentially erasing, but that would be chayav, right? The malacha of mochek, malacha of erasing, it's only mochek al menat lichtov. We have a number of melachot in Hilchot Shabbat which are actually destructive melachot. Principle is melechet machshevet, when it's only going to be chayav on a Torah level, midrabanan will be different, but on a Torah level, one is only chayav melachot when they are performed in a constructive manner. So, for example, the melacha of erasing, it's only when it's erasing in order to write. Or, for example, if you erase a letter, which actually makes you have two words that are joined together with a letter in the middle, which makes gibberish. But if you would erase that letter, you can then read the two words. That's constructive. Same thing with destroying, right? Soter al manat livnot. There is a melacha of building, there's a melacha of destroying, but destroying is only in order to build. Okay, so yeah, but if you perform that action in a way which is a tikkun, which is a correction, that would be chayav min haTorah. So he says, that if you that destroying, removing a tattoo, that is a correction, that is a tikkun, and therefore it would be chayav. Why? Because you're forbidden from having a tattoo. Even though it's only at the time of making the tattoo that one would get the Makkot, right? He says, nonetheless, to have it remaining on one's skin, that is not correct. So says the Minchas Chinuch, he is mechadesh, that maybe there is a responsibility to remove the tattoo as well. So the question then comes up. He says somebody who converted, and when they were not Jewish, they had a tattoo put on, and then they converted. Would they have to remove the tattoo? Says Rav Zilberstein, it would be correct to do so. He says, even though there was no prohibition at the time because they weren't Jewish, nonetheless, it's not fitting, and they shouldn't. And then he asks a question, as I said, a very, very painful question, but which is discussed. So those who have a tattoo, which were those who survived the Holocaust, and had the tattoos placed by the Nazis in Machshemam, would they be required to remove that? So he says, Dafka, no. He says over there is actually a ma'ala in terms of keeping that. He heard from Rav Eliezer Silva, who says one should not remove those numbers, and that is a fulfillment of the mitzvah of remembering Zechirat Amalek. He also quotes the halacha that if Jewish blood was spilt on a stone on the wall, that you should leave it there. You should not clean up that blood in order to remember what happened. And so to the same thing over here. And Shut Mimam Akim, which is the Shut of Rav Oshi, which was actually written during the Holocaust. He says some of it was written during and some was added after. He says that in the tattoo we show, he says Anu Mar'im She'al Kedushat Shmoit Barach Horadnu Kol Hayom, showing the what we suffered for being Jewish, and therefore that should remain. Okay. So says the Gemara now. So that was the Mishnah told us that the Chiyuv Malkut would only be for both Ktov, Katav, and Kaka. And then there was another opinion of Rabbi Shimon who said that it's only Ad Shechtov Tashem that you would be Chayav. So it says, he says, I don't understand. It doesn't mean that you'd be chayiv if you wrote Mamash Shem Hashem, right? Because the pasuk said Ani Hashem. Is that the only case where one would get Malkot? No. Kedetani Bar Kapala. Enoch Yav Ad Yotov Shem Avodat Kochavim. Says when he said Shichtov Et Hashem, but the Shem of Yah is not referring to Shem Hashem. L'havdil, it's referring to Shem Avodat Kochavim. If this was the idolatrous practice, they would put a tattoo with the name of their gods, so to speak. So that is for that one would get Malkot for inscribing the name of this Avodat Kochavim. Eino chayav ad shichtov Shem Avodat Kochavim shene'amar uktovet ka'aka lo titnu bachem ani Hashem velo acher. I am Hashem and no others. Therefore, if you put in other names as the tattoo, that would be forbidden, and that would be Malkot. Again, even if it's not the shame of an Avodah Zarah, even Rabbi Shimon presumably would agree that it's forbidden, but just not that it is a chiyuv Malkot. Okay, let's just look at one more thing before we move on. Maybe two more things, in fact. So the Aruch LaNer, right. He says over here. Okay, he quotes the Rambam that we discussed. He quotes the following. He says here. He says, "Gam in ba'ina nitchayev shechaven l'shem avodah zarah lo huzkar b'poskim." Right. There is. It seems to be. He says, what if a person made the tattoo but did not intend that it was for avodah zarah? Is that still a prohibition? So it seems to be, because the Rambam quotes. Maybe let's just read the paragraph before in the Aruch LaNer. He says like this. מניתן הכותב כתובת קרקע. הרמב"ם בהלכות עקוב כתב במה דברים אמורים בו כותב, אבל זה שכתבו בבשרו וקרקע בו אינו חייב, אלא אם כן סייג. That's what we saw before, where the Rambam says it's only the one who's making the tattoo who is chayav, not the one who had the tattoo done to him, unless he did siva. So כתב הכסף משנה, כסף משנה was the Beit Yosef, says לא ידעתי לו מקום מפורש. Kesef Mishnah says, I don't know what the source of the Rambam is. The Kesef Mishnah, by the way, which is the Beit Yosef, he wrote the Kesef Mishnah on the Rambam, and he wrote the Beit Yosef on the Tur. Now, in the Kesef Mishnah, he goes through, and every place the Rambam, as is well known, did not write sources for what he did not write sources for his halachot. So the Kesef Mishnah goes through, and every place he writes the source in the Gemara, where the Rambam, or in Chazal, where the Rambam got it from. Sometimes you'll see in the Kesef Mishnah, there's a Dibur HaMatchil, which is a quote from the Rambam, and then it's left blank. There's nothing written there. The way that the Kesef Mishnah wrote his book was that he went through every section and he wrote the headings, and then he went through and he found the sources for where the Rambam got it from. Sometimes he doesn't find it, so he was going to go back and fill it in. But there is no source, so therefore it's not a mistake, but it's just there that it's left empty. But over here says the Kesef Mishnah, what is the Rambam source that the person who's having a tattoo done to them does not get the Malkot? So that's not said anywhere explicitly. He says maybe he learned it from the din of Hakafat HaRosh, as we explained previously. So he says, La'niyutati Yatzala Rambam Ken Tosefta. Says the Kesef Mishnah. I think maybe the Rambam source for this is from the Tosefta, which says, Hakotev Ktovet Ka'aka. The basar shel chavelo. Okay, so somebody writes a tattoo on somebody else's skin. Shneim chayavim. Both of them are chayav. Wait a minute, the Rambam just said that the second one is not chayav. So he says, B'med dvarim amurim, says the Tosefta. When do we say they're chayav? Bizman sheshneim mezidin v'chule. When both of them are mezid. What does that mean? So he says, Areid beperush. If he is mazid, if he's doing it intentionally, only if he helps. He says, and the shiur we don't know. Right, and then he says, Yavachi harav memhei leiv zatzal. He says, his brother herich beyanim ha'elu b'michtav shemat yom b'dvarim nechochim. וגם העביר היה לספר חינוך, תפעילו עוד אחד מקרי כתיבה, maybe even if it was just one letter, לכן לא ידעתי מנהל לחינוך ובין שיכתוב. Okay. And then he says like this. He says, "Gam im ba'inan litchayev shechaven l'shem avodah zara lo huzkar b'poskim u'mistimat divrayim nired kol k'tov v'karka chayav afilu lo asar l'shem avodah zara mamash." He says where we said it has to be mazid. Does mazid mean that a person intended that it should be l'shem avodah zara? So says the Aruch Laner, we haven't found that the Mishnah doesn't say that should only be chayav. That should only be chayav if you did the ketovet karka, the tattoo, for the sake of avodah zara. He says v'tamati shebetosefta eino ken the katuv sham eino chayav ad shekakeh b'yor kacho le'avodah zara ad kana shana. So the tosefta over there, which we just quoted, says that no, you'd only be chayav if you did it le'avodah zara. And he says over there, therefore, Arid b'perush, the rakim l'shem avodah zara was a chayav. So from the Tosefta, it sounds like, again, our question is, when a person does this tattoo, when would they get Makkot? So Rabbi Shimon was the one who said, right, basically in our Mishnah, the opinion of Rabbi Shimon that said, it's only Makkot if you write the shem. If you write the shem of avodah zara, there seemingly would be done for avodah zara. But according to the Tanna Kama, anytime a person does a tattoo, would be chayav Makkot. So he says, why is it that the Tosefta says only if it's for avodah zara? Harei beperush derakim shem avodah zara zechav. Midivrei Rambam ve'Atur enech rei. He says from the Rambam and the Torah it's not clear. Shekatvu dayak tovet karka chok avodat elilim. Since the Rambam writes and the Torah writes b'kvotav that why is a tattoo forbidden? Because that was the idolatrous practice. So he says, they might be writing that to inform us that it's only if you did it l'shem avodah zara that you would get Makkot. And if so, then he says, the nafkamina would be that when a person gets hatra'ah for what they're doing with getting Makkot, the hatra'ah would have to include that it is l'shem avodah zara. Okay, basically all of this was an introduction to understand the following kasha. The Gemara in Gittin. I don't know if people are doing Daf Yomi. Where's Daf Yomi up to now? Okay, not sure if anybody here is doing it, but it will be very, very soon. He's going to get to Daf Chaf, which is, and the Gemara in Gittin and Daf Chaf talks about the following case, a very, very creative case. There are all sorts of creative ways of giving gets once upon a time. One of the ways it says, what if you write the get on the hand of an eved, if you write on the hand of a servant? And it says how would you, the get has to be permanent. So therefore, it says you could have a get which was done as a tattoo on one's eved. Now asks the Gemara, wait a minute. Well, Tosfot already asked the question. It says you're not allowed to make a ketovet karka, you're not allowed to make a tattoo. Not only on yourself, you're not allowed to do it on somebody else. So how could it be that the get over there would be allowed? So they say that if it's an isur d'Rabbanan, maybe it's going to be permitted. But so the Aruch Laner continues that we just saw. I want to share the screen with you, but I've just lost it. One moment. Yeah. So he says the following. So I'll read the Aruch Laner continues. He says, Bazeh, with what we've just explained, that the chiyuv might only be when it's done l'shem avodah zara. Based on that, we can understand what it says the Gemara gets in. B'ktovet karka. He says, Ayen sham tosfot shediku. Halayesh isur b'zeh d'Rabbanan or afilu d'oraita. Tosfot says there's an isur, maybe d'Rabbanan, maybe d'oraita, of making this ktovet karka. How can you make the get like that? And they gave their answer. But he says the Beit Shmuel, who's one of the Mefarshim on the Shulchan Aruch Even HaEzer, asks the following. Listen to this question. He says, he says the get's not going to be kosher. Why? Mishum denasu eidim reshayim shechanu b'ktovet karka. Says if the eidim have to come along and they have to sign the get. How is the get done? The get is done as a tattoo. So for the witnesses to come and sign the get, they have to make a tattoo. But that is a Torah prohibition of making a ketovet karka. So the moment that they come along and sign the get, they are performing a Torah prohibition, and therefore they are making themselves risha'im, and therefore they are pasul, they are invalid witnesses. So by definition, by signing the get, they're actually making themselves pasul for edut. because it's an Isur D'Oraita. So says Aruch Laner, okay. If we say that the Yesod Rabbanan is only going to be is only going to be when it's done l'shem avodah zarah, and as we're about to see in the Gemara, that there's still going to be, even when it's not done l'shem avodah zarah, there's still going to be an Yesod Rabbanan, because it might look like it's being done for that. If it's being done as part of a get, and it's clear, then no one's going to suspect that is being done for avodah zarah. So that is the way he answers the kasha of Tosfot. Very, very interesting case over there in the Gemara. Very creative way, for lack of a better word, of writing a get, but that relates to our sugya. So we've gone from Ilchot avodah zarah into Ilchot Shabbat, into Ilchot Gittin. Okay, let's go back to our Gemara. So now says the Gemara the following din. It says, we're about 4 lines down from where the Gemara starts. Okay, the Gemara after the Mishnah. So the Marav Malkia, Amarav Ada Barahava, Solo Adam, Shiten Efe Makle Al Gabe Makato. So it says Rav Malkia, the Gemara is going to say in a moment, there were 2 Amoraim. One was called Rav Malkiya, and one was called Rav Malkiyo. Okay, very confusing. The Gemara is actually going to give us some techniques to try and remember what Rav Malkiya said and what Rav Malkiyo said, because it can get very easily confusing. But it says Rav Malkiya, in the name of Rav Ada Barahava, person cannot put ash which has been from something, wood which has been burnt, one cannot place that on their wound. Apparently this was the form of refuah in those days. Why not? It looks like a tattoo, even though it's not going to be permanent. But at that time, because it looks like it, again, if we understand that this whole prohibition of Ktovet Kaka derives from Avodah Zarah, we understand why we're so stringent and why we want to put so many fences up against it to distance ourselves from it. So you have a wound in one's skin, and then you put the ash on top, and the ash is sort of absorbed in. The person's putting it there in order for a refuah to heal them, but it's going to appear like it's like you're making a tattoo, and therefore he says that is prohibited. Amar Rav Nachman. So now we're going to see the Gemara is going to tell us how we remember. There were 3 things which were said by Rav Malkiya, 3 things which were said by Rav Malkiyo. How do we remember who is who? So Amar Rav Nachman Breder Rav Ika. Shipud Shvachot V'Gumot Rav Malkiyo, Blorit Efe Meklev V'Gvina Rav Malkiya. So there were these 3 halachot. The first sort of a code word for each one, right? It says Rav Nachman Breder of Ika, the halacha regarding shipud, regarding shvachot, and regarding gumot. In a moment, we'll say briefly what each one is. Those were said by Rav Malkiyo, and regarding blurit, efe makleh, and kvina, they were said by Rav Malkiya. Obviously, efe makleh is our case over here. So what are these different cases? So shipud is if you have a skewer that you use to roast meat on Yom Tov, you're allowed to cook, right? You're allowed to roast on Yom Tov, not on Shabbat, but on Yom Tov. So the shipud, but once it's been used to roast meat on it, it's all disgusting. It's got all the fat and it's all dirty, and it becomes muktzah. However, said Rav Malkiya, you would be allowed to perform tiltul min hatzad, meaning you'd be allowed to move it in an unusual way, even though it's you'd be allowed to move it on Yom Tov. That is the din of shipud. Shvachot is that there are certain obligations that are brought in the ketubah that a woman has when she comes into marriage, certain obligations that a man has as well, of course, and if she has, one of the things is that Maseh Adah, that there are certain things, certain forms of work which the wife has to perform. If she brings in shvachot, if she has maidservants that come into that are going to do all the work for her, so then the discussion is, does she still have to do anything? And there's an opinion in the Gemara that says yes, she still does, so that she won't come towards batala. So that is the din of shvachot, and the din of gumot that relates to follicles, relates to sort of reaching physical maturity. The din is that when a person has got 2 hairs, that is when they reach a physical maturity, and that's when they become a gadol and no longer a katan. Sorry, I've just got an alert here on the side of my screen that Rav Edelstein, his condition has deteriorated, so we daven for our learning should be for a refuah shlema for him as well. there is so we say so gumot, meaning that if there are the hair, the discussion in the Gemara, whether it's just the hairs or sort of the where the follicles are going to grow out of, if there is that if that is already there, even without the hairs, that may be recognizable. So those are the three dinim that were said by Rav Malkiah, and then there are the three dinim which were said by Rav Malkiah. Sorry. So we said, yeah, Rav Nachman Rav Eka, Shput Shvachot v'Gumot Rav Malkiah. Sorry, other way around. Right, those were Rav Malkiah. Blurit Efer Maklei Gvina Rav Malkiah. So blurit is a type of a haircut that they would have, that the idolaters again would grow their hair in the middle, very, very long, and then they would cut it off and they would offer it as a token to their gods. So if a Jewish barber is cutting the hair of somebody who is non-Jewish, then he needs to leave extra hair around where the blurit is, so that he's not being assisting in avodah zarah. Efer makleh, that's a din which we just saw now, and gvina, eating cheese of non-Jews. There's a long discussion in the Gemara as to why that would be forbidden. One of the reasons explained by Rav Malkiah is that they would use pig fat in their cheese as well, and therefore be non-kosher ingredients. Okay, so those are the three dinim. That's the way we distinguish it according to Rav Nachman. Rav Papa Amar matnitin umatnita Rav Malkiah shmatata Rav Malkiah. So Rav Papa learns slightly differently. He says not the same as Rav Nachman. He says the way to remember is that any time it was a din which was related to something which was said in the Mishnah or the Braita, that's matnitin umatnita, that would be Rav Malkiah. If, on the other hand, it's shmatata, it's a statement by one of the Amoraim, that would be Rav Malkiah. And then he says v'simanech matnita malkita. Right? Matnita sounds like Rav Malkiah, sounds more like Malchut, and that is that is a way to remember. Okay, now it says the Gemara my banayu. So what's the difference between them? Between the way Rav Nachman remembers and the way Rav Papa remembers. So ika banayu shvachot. That case of shvachot, that you'd have to switch it around, depending on which. So there's machloket between Rav Nachman and Rav Papa as to whether that name was said in the name of Rav Malkiah or the name of Rav Malkiah. Okay, let's just finish up. Rav Bibi bar Abaye kapid afilu aribda de kosilta. Right, so we said that you can't put Efer Makleh on the wound. So now says the Gemara over here, says Rav Bibi bar Abaye, he was makbid not to put this Efer Makleh, not to put this dust, even on a rivda de kusilta, even if you had a very, very, very small wound, if somebody had like a needle and a very, very small incision, he said also that would look like from bloodletting. He says also that would look like a tattoo, and therefore he's stringent. On the other hand, Rav Ashi says differently. Rav Ashi amar kol makom sheyesh sham makah, makato mochiach alav. Rashi says, no, if you have a wound, so he's arguing with this thing. He says, if you have a wound and you put the dust on, everybody knows, and you can see that no one's going to suspect of avodah zarah. It's not there for the sake of avodah zarah, for the sake of a tattoo. It's there for healing the wound, and therefore that would be okay. All right, Adkan. Tomorrow we will continue B'ezrat Hashem from the next Mishnah. Everybody have a wonderful day.
Thank you very much. Both do.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.